I feel like I
Well,
look like
we
a
both look like hell, so 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the morning for me. Yes, you just said you're
and
feeling fabulous despite everything being
like
terrible.
it's all fucked. Everything's fucked. But and I
Oh,
feel like life circumstances, like if I really look at it, I'm like, oh yes, things are continuing to pile up and really like get worse. But I feel great. And one of the big reasons for that is actually because I did a values, well, actually, I did it a while ago, but I didn't act on it. So I did this whole like values thing. I don't even know what to call
exercise,
it. It's an
exercise.
exercise. It is an exercise. And essentially what you do is you like have a list of general values. These are like the most common values that people have in life, I would say. And it's a pretty substantial list. There's
Mm,
maybe a couple things I would add to it, but for the most part, it's like quite substantial. You have three columns, and on one column, you put how much worth this has for you. So, like, you would put a percentage. So, this I value, 80% or whatever it is. And then in the second column, you write down how much you're showing up with that value in your life right now. And so that's your like snapshot. And obviously, you're looking at the dissonance between the two. Like, okay, I say that perfection is a 10 out of 10 value, but I'm showing up as a 5. So, how is that gonna like, you know, disrupt my life? Or I say leadership is a 2 value and I'm showing up as an 8. Okay, so maybe there's a reason why I'm feeling some frustration. I'm not in a good role for myself, or I'm having to take on more than I like to, whatever it is. And then the third column is an example, which I think is actually so powerful. And I never thought about that. But you give an example of how you're showing up in your life like that, because different people will hear the same word and the same value and they'll place it extremely differently.
mm.
So both me and my partner did this, and we really did this for each other. So it was like check-ins with each other. Um, and so that's when I did it like maybe a month or so ago, but I didn't really like wear it. And then the other day I was like, you know what? Like shit's going south. Let me look at my values. What did I say on that value thing? And I went through it again, more like on a solo trip. And I was like, okay, so one of the big things that showed up for me is like adventure is a 10 out of 10. And
Mm.
I do have big adventures. Like, let's be real, in a month, I'll be back in South Africa for 2 months. I'm here right now in Amsterdam. I just left Canada a month ago. Like, if you really look at it, I mean, I have adventures, but what I realized is for me, it's not good enough to just have the big adventures. Those are great, and I need those too, because those keep me going and keep me excited and keep me pushing.
Mm.
But I need like weekly mini adventures. And
Wow, you're
that
an adventure junkie.
I'm like a full-on 10 out of 10 adventure person. So like, but it doesn't need to be a massive adventure. For me, when I'm in study mode, what I tend to do is I just study. And if I'm not studying, I'm like working out or like
Doing
doing
this.
something. Yeah, doing this really. Like it's really there's nothing exciting going on at all. And so
What?
today,
Excuse me?
I mean, outside of my norms, exciting being something new, fresh, never done
There's
before.
really nothing exciting going on. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here like, how are we gonna do this? How are we expanding? What is all of this stuff? What are these task lists? You want adventure? We brought adventure. We have it. How dare
This
you?
is an adventure, but it's also a lot of the stuff that I do in Bombshells are the same every week. So then it's not new. There's not
Oh,
novelness
you want some
anymore.
new things?
I
Let
need
me
some
give
new
you some new
things,
things.
Rob. So today I was like, okay, well, yesterday I like planned it out and I was like, tomorrow I have the Bombshells like work day. So just so you guys know, Kristina and I do like a 4-hour Saturday work day. I was like, I'm gonna do that. And I know I have schoolwork, but I'm not gonna do it. Or if I have time, like I'll do it great, but I'm not gonna like prioritize it. I'm gonna go to the zoo. I have been curious about the zoo here. It's one of the oldest zoos in Europe. And I've been curious, and I'm not a zoo person. Normally, I really hate zoos. But I was like, this looks like such an incredible zoo. And I was like, I'm just gonna go out. And so I had a little like mini me date, and I went
I
out to
love
the
that.
zoo. And then I went to the microbial museum, which is fucking incredible for any science nerds out there. Um,
Or any nerds, anyone, any person.
anyone, any nerd, anyone who wants to like wash their hands, repeat. Like, hey, if you
Anyone
are afraid
who wants to wash their hands repeatedly.
non-stop. You know what I think, honestly, like everyone who is not a hands washer, because there's a lot of them. I don't know why you're looking so shocked right now, because
No.
I guarantee everyone's seen that person walk out of the bathroom without washing their hands.
Pre-COVID, maybe. Post-COVID, like everyone's trying to just throw soap at each other.
I don't think so. I don't think so. Post-COVID,
No.
I'm still seeing dirty bugs like everywhere.
You know, okay, this is why I was laughing at you, because I immediately had an image of you trying to pitch to the Microbial Museum their brand new marketing campaign of, do you obsessively wash your hands? Well, if that is the case. Oh my God.
It was the most incredible thing. They had okay, so first of all, you get on this elevator. Wait, you can't get on the elevator. Music starts, and then it's like, we're going to take you on this journey. And then you get in this elevator, and there's like, on the ceiling, you look up and you can see yourself. So it looks like a mirror. So someone was pointing, and I was like, oh yeah, we can see ourselves in there. And then all of a sudden, this movie starts on the ceiling of this elevator, and it's like taking you and zooming into the earth, and then into like biomes and like all of this stuff. Like there's bacteria and there's molecules and all this stuff, and you're zooming in as the elevator is going up.
That's
it was
so cool.
interactive. They did such an amazing job, and like,
oh my gosh, I want to go.
It's so good. And like, being a comm science nerd, it like hit everything for me, because they also had like, when you talk about like persuasive technology and persuasive design, they had like these cards, and you had to collect stamps for every little, station you went to. And that gives us a little bit of like, it gives everyone that little perk that they need. So you get a little endorphin boost because you collected your stamp. And I was like, dude, they're gamifying learning. Like, it's so smart.
Well, the way they're doing it sounds great. I mean, look, I was just looking here because I was looking at I was trying to find have you read The Artist's Way?
No.
Oh,
I'm gonna write that down. The Artist's Way?
The Artist's Way. And I normally, like, I'll do this is where, because obviously we're in a different setting, or I am. This is my office space, and this is where we do our work weeks from. But The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. It's a book that was written in the 60s. I have no idea where it is. Did I give this? I don't give those books. I don't give books away. I don't lend books anymore. It's a yellow book, and I highly recommend it. It's a 12-week program to rediscover your artist self. It's not relevant if you are wanting to do professional art of any kind or not. It is more about reconnection with yourself in a creative way. So I feel like you would, I don't know where I put it, but it's a fantastic book. I highly recommend it. And I think you should do it. I think I'm due to do it as well. We should oh my gosh, I should get a copy for the whole team.
Oh, that would be fabulous, because actually it's funny that you say that, because that was that was my other gap that I was noticing in my values, that creativity is a huge one. And I am creative all the time, like through school and Bombshells, and but it was really like my soul creations, like writing. I haven't written I mean, I started when I was in South Africa last time, and it felt so incredible to start writing again. And I used to draw, and I used to sing, and I used to I was extremely creative. And to be honest, since I became like adulting world and started career and all of that, I really started dropping all of those passions. So now I'm on a quest to get back into like a creative drive. So here we go. That is okay. I'm gonna pick up this book, and I am going to do my 12 weeks of gaining back my creativity.
I think
How are you feeling?
I think well, just to wrap up that, I think that's an amazing thing to do. And I think, firstly, identifying values exercises. I did a very similar one with Larry, who says hi, by the way. I did one to find out what my my highest priority values were to begin with. So what I'd be interested in doing is doing my one first and then doing your one afterwards. Because then I knew that my top value was, and for me, it is freedom of choice. It's actually, technically, it's freedom. So the exercise that Larry had given me was very simple. You basically have all of these words: freedom, truth, security, safety, physical safety. Like it goes down this big list. And what you do is you start from the very top and you say, okay, out of truth and safety, which do I value more? And then you choose one. And then out of truth and next one, which do I value more? And you keep going down until
cool.
Yeah, and so you're not making the decision. The decision's being made by virtue of you excluding and choosing one at a time. Oh, I value this one, I value this one. So I did it this way. Yeah, bypasses so much of our brain that's calculative, right? Because you don't have time to think. You're just like, just out of these two. My brain is just being asked out of two. Out of two, I value freedom over truth. I value freedom over honesty. I value this over this. I value this over this. And at the end of the exercise, my biggest thing, I thought my biggest value was honesty, and it was very, very close, but my actual biggest value is freedom. So what happened was I got to a stage where I was like, oh, I'm recognizing that honesty is a fantastic value that I have that's pretty much at the top. But if people don't have their freedom, and specifically, if people don't have freedom of choice, I have a problem. I have a massive, massive problem. So whenever you and I have any kind of conflict where you're like, I want this to happen, I'm like, we haven't given these people the choice yet, which is not to say that you don't want them to have the choice, but immediately that's the first thing that comes to my mind. I'm like, does everyone have active choice? And what I realized is that it shaped my entire career now. Because I defined it, I then made decisions on which jobs I'd go for, how I behave in my jobs, in my career, and how I approach everything else. Because and then now the question that I'm asking myself is why? Why is that so important to me? And one of the big things that I've found is that in the conversations coming up, I'm speaking on a World City panel. I've spoken on like a development panel for an entire city to reimagine a specific section of the city. And I was like, whenever I listen to people speak, I'm like, are you actually, when people propose suggestions, propose solutions, propose all of these different things without sufficient metrics or with sufficient metrics, both of which happened and happen on many panels that I'm on, the subjectivity is hard for me to work my way through in order to really question whether or not freedom of choice has been given to the stakeholders of the outcome of whatever we're talking about, which sounds like a lot of words. But the reality is, if someone says to me, we should do this because it's the right thing for this area, I'm going to turn around and say, who are the stakeholders and do they know that? And have they been given an opportunity to speak to that? Because otherwise you're just telling people what to do, which we both know I have a problem with. I don't like the authority.
So interesting, because actually I'm looking at a program right now and I'm going to reach out to them next week and see if there's a way that I can maybe do my thesis out there, but it's in Tanzania. And it's really interesting. And they're working with women on like women's rights and human rights. And they're also creating new programs for health, which is brand new. And so they said, we'll work with you, because I think a lot of students will go and work with them, and there's room for research. So there might be something in there that I can kind of pull out. But one of the things that really
road trip to Tanzania,
right? Thank you.
I'll be on my way. Me and Glenn.
It's like, I don't know, it just looks incredible. And one of the things that really stood out to me when I was reading about this specific program, because I looked at tons and tons of programs, And for big companies like Philips and Dove and Unilever, like I looked at huge companies. And this one stood out to me because they were saying they need people to work on women's rights, like educating and helping women understand their rights and their options, because the women there, a lot of them don't feel that they have human rights. So it's one thing to give people choice, but if people have choice, but they don't feel like they have the right to make the choice, then what? Right? Like
Then do they have that choice? Like,
and do they
yeah.
have that choice? Are they able to make it to someone else, make it for them? Like how do you perpetuate that? So that was kind of my, when you were saying that, I was like, oh, that's so interesting, because this is kind of the rabbit hole I've been going down recently with this program. I'm like, this is just, I mean, we talk about feminism, we talk about women's rights all the time, we talk about women in the workplace and all of this stuff, but it's just, even with that, it's so crazy to acknowledge that we're from such a privileged, I don't want to even just say society, but just instance, like our lives are so privileged that we
Circumstances. Yeah.
know that something is wrong here. To even be able to
Hmm.
identify that something is wrong
Oh my gosh.
is
So,
already a
okay.
privilege in and of itself.
That's an amazing, I love that conversation, because recently with the divisiveness of COVID, of in BC there's a vaccine passport, which means you can't get into restaurants, you can't go to a lot of places of entertainment and places of gathering.
Mhm.
And you know, one of the conversations that I'm listening to, thanks to the conversation we had with Kemi
Oh yeah.
about normalizing having both sides and every side in your feed. So I get everything. I get the very right wing, very left wing, the everything in between, and also I listen to the extraordinary feeds and threads of people who are clearly, you know, speaking out in concern, in fear, in all of these, you know, spaces. But it's a really interesting thing where you have a whole a time in life where when people say things about how someone should be, they have no concept of how many steps it might actually take for them to get there. So even in the diversity space, even when we talk about racism and equality and, you know, and social justice, when you have someone who has potentially, and I really don't want to stereotype, so I'll try and make it as generic as possible, but someone who has grown up in a space that does not have a great deal of education in that sphere, that doesn't necessarily have the socioeconomic factors that allow you to be past some certain survival mechanisms, that are experiencing extraordinarily high barriers to entry and potentially a lot of trauma surrounding those barriers to entry. How then, when you know all of these things, do you say to somebody, you need to go and do this? It's very simple. It's just these 3 steps. Why are you thinking in this way that forces you to understand how to critically think about science, given the extraordinary overwhelm of information and misinformation that you are now expected to sift through and patronized if you don't? Like,
Yeah.
and so when we have this conversation, I have to remind myself, because I do it. I turn around and I'm like, but this is easy. You
Yeah.
just do this. And it's like, yeah, this is easy when I have not had to starve, when I have not had to fight for my survival in the same way as so much of the world, you know, and even a
Never
lot of
mind people
friends.
who had bad experiences with doctors or the medical systems. Like, I don't even want to say doctors. Let's say the medical systems in
The
general.
healthcare in general.
It's healthcare. Yeah. If you've had negative, just any kind of negative situation, really, then you're going to be a lot less trusting of those
Mm-hmm.
systems. So that's a whole nother thing. Actually, um, the Superwoman Code.
Oh,
We
yes, Ashley
were
Margison,
actually,
Dr.
yeah,
Ashley.
Ashley Margison, she was on a podcast of ours. I don't remember what number, but we'll put it in the show notes. Anyways, she has her own podcast, which is called the Superwoman Code, and she has an incredible
Mm-hmm.
episode on vaccinations. And she's talking to a woman who actually works for WHO, And she's also, I think, the vaccinations someone of Halifax. I don't want to get her her career wrong, like her title wrong, but basically she's the one who, or not her herself, but she leads the team who decides on which vaccinations and things will be mandated and which ones won't, which ones they're going to bring into Canada and which ones won't.
Episode 27 is Dr. Margison.
Is okay, perfect. Episode 27.
Just so you know.
But yeah, on her own podcast, she has that episode, and I highly recommend listening to it. I've sent it to a few people now. It is not specific to COVID. I will say that, just to be clear, it is not specific to COVID, but it is specific to vaccinations, how vaccinations work. They talk about a number of vaccinations for a number of massive basically pandemics over the years, so including HPV. She worked heavily on HPV. I think they talked about polio, if I'm not incorrect, and then there was another one as well. So really highly recommend listening to that if you're interested in learning more about vaccinations and how they work and why people are afraid of them.
Right.
Why communicating about it is difficult for science nerds like me. But yeah, that's an awesome episode.
Yeah, it's a really and the Superwoman Code, right?
Yeah, the Superwoman Code, which also is just such an epic title.
I know. It's so great. It's so great. We are surrounded by such incredible people doing just awesome stuff. But again, you know, going back to the values, because I think this is what that's what is kind of fueling you, is that you're feeling great right now because you've identified you know what your values are. Now that you're aware of it, you're hyper sensitive to whether or not you're fulfilling it. And actually, I think it's really interesting that you said to what level you're fulfilling it and what needs to happen on a daily basis. So you asked how I was, and I guess, you know, you and I circle around, and it's by virtue of being, you know, on Bombshells. I feel like the team is like this as well. Hannah's amazing like that. Like, she's constantly looking for incredible guests to come in, and they're so suited. But our brains are starting to think in that very be brave, live full, like, what can we do to continue to grow and evolve? And one of the things that I was realizing was I'm listening to a lot of these conversations that we've had over the last like couple of weeks, and I have to now look at, okay, how do I want to design my life so that my values are being recognized, respected, and sufficiently articulated that I'm magnetizing the appropriate aligned people and organizations rather than seeking them or justifying or trying to prove. So there's so much that I found recently that is like, I've had so many conversations and so many instances where my values were compromised. But I took on jobs or things that I wanted to do or initiatives because of other factors that weren't led by my values, that were led by my loyalty or led by other things that actually I realized when I unpacked were coming from an insecurity instead of, so I'm really playing with this.
Or a place of need, like
that's
money,
exactly
let's say, right? Like when everyone's done it. Everyone, I don't know a single person who hasn't taken on a job when they needed money that was like full blown not right.
And I think that that's okay, but I think that it's necessary, but knowing what it is really important, because otherwise my integrity feels like it starts to erode. So become my,
but you have to be clear about what your like which values, like if you have a 10 out of 10 value for something, like let's say honesty, and then you work for a corporation who's incredibly dishonest, that is just never gonna work. Not only because it's gonna like annoy you, but I think it's actually gonna eat away at your soul. Like that's what I'm starting to realize. And it's the same with like partners and all of these things. Like I I don't know about you, but like when you did your values, did you start thinking about the partners that you have? Because,
The people in general. It was the
right?
people in general, right? Because
Yeah.
I also then I thought to myself, and I think that's why, you know, you and your partner doing it is really, it's very cool because you get a base level to have a conversation, you know. And I
Hmm.
think what, you know, I'd love to be able to do that with everybody. I mean, Raven, my older sister, will send stuff like that to my family and be like she sent
Really?
oh yeah, she sent what is it, the love languages, 5 love languages. Have you ever read that book?
Totally. Yes, I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so she was like, hello fam, this is what we're all doing now. You don't have to read the book, but you have to do this test. I'll send us your results. That's, and she, you know, I love my sisters so much. I love both my sisters. Raven is very, very good at just saying, this is important. We need to do this as a faculty, a family faculty. We're doing this. And I find it really interesting that I've spent most of my life with my family dynamic being open enough to push each other to do things that sometimes I'm like, I don't want to do that. But then I do it and I'm like, you know what? I learned. And what did I lose? So I would love to do that with friends. I would love to do that in organizations. You know, Mike did it when I worked at the recording school. And he did it with, who are you in terms of your color, your management, like management, or the way that your behavioral color. You know, red is more aggressive, assertive, you know, blue is a little bit more calm and calculative, green is a lot more like numbers based, and we can all probably tell which one I was. And orange is more I think purple is more creative, orange was something else. Uh, but these things, they seem like team building exercises. The reality is they're bases of communication
Hmm.
and of shared vocabulary. And we're so,
Yeah.
you know, when Carmela Sisson came on and she was talking about our, you know, how important it is to really ground in our language and how young English is, you know, compared to other languages. It's so
Hmm.
important to understand
Yeah.
that we're in, you know, we need to work. We need to work to understand ourselves and each other. That's not
Yeah.
something that I think we have been doing, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's about like finding those ways to fulfill yourself. And there's so many, you're right, there's so many tools out there to help. Like
Mm.
part of it is communicating, part of it is internal work. Part of it is like what are you attracting to yourself? And when you're aware of those things, then you can start, you know, attracting it. I think most people are probably pretty intuitive. Um, about these things. Like I find that I was quite intuitive to it. I would know something is off, but then I might not know exactly which one. But by
Mm.
doing the values thing, I was able to like go through the list. I'm like, where am I missing? Like, what am I missing here? Okay, I've got education. I'm constantly learning. I'm doing these things. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I've got structure. All of these things are good. Aha. It
Mm-hmm.
was this. Like, this is what I was missing, and this was what I was missing. And I think it just gives you like I don't know, like a little bit of a check-in. And you're absolutely right, like communicating it to each other because even for example with my partner, I was like, I realized like I need to adventure. So now this thing with Tanzania came up and I was like, I'm gonna gun for it. Like I don't know if I'll do it, I don't know if it'll happen, but I'm gonna gun for it. And
Mm.
I mean, that freaked him out because he doesn't really love the idea of me traveling by myself in areas like that because yeah, it's not. I don't know about Tanzania itself, but I definitely know there's like it's right beside Rwanda and there's definitely some like war-torn
Conflict.
countries around it. Like yeah, definitely some conflict around it. But those are also areas where they can use the help, they can use the growth, they can use the hands on deck. Like,
Yeah, and I think the thing is, yeah, I would have the same concerns, but the reality is you just need to explore it. Like so many people
yeah,
I have found when I do career coaching with people, when we talk about constructing these jungle gyms that are not, you know, your career's not a ladder, it's jungle gym.
yeah,
You've got to build those muscles in various ways. Uh, when we talk about that, I think a lot of people stop themselves before they even begin. So you don't
Yes.
know how far, and
Yes.
and you know the reason it's not a them problem. It's a systemic issue about outcome based thinking. So when you say,
Oh,
"Oh, I'm going to do this," you go, "Okay, well, my you know, let's say let's keep these values in there." You're
yeah.
like, I value this. This is what I want. This is what I really want." And then you let the world, which external factors then dictate to you whether you take a step forward instead of
Yeah.
actually saying, okay, this is what I want to do. Here's, and what I normally do is an exercise with my clients where I'll go, okay, here's the top outcome that you want. Let's paint it as specifically as possible, because the
Hmm.
more specific you paint it, you then can break it down and understand what the traits are. So you could turn around
Hmm.
and go, this is what I love, this is why I love it, this is what the program is. And you said to me once, well, I think recently we had it on one of our shows, one of our talks. Um, you then have a B plan that's even better than the A plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the reason you can make those plans, or part of the reason, is because you understand the traits of that
Yeah.
outcome, and then you
Yeah.
remove the attachment to the outcome. Because for me, I'm not going to be Wonder Woman while Gal Gadot still exists. That's not a real, like, I'm not. It's not available. It is not available to me. But when I build the blue sky, this is my favorite way of describing it to people. I say, you know, I if I had everything and I couldn't fail, and the world was exactly as I wanted it, Gal Gadot wouldn't exist, you know, because I'm not a murderer. I'm not going to like take care of Gal Gadot. Um, uh, but so she wouldn't exist. She'd be someone else, pretty awesome, but not Wonder Woman. Um, uh, and I would be Wonder Woman in this series, playing these amazing roles, doing action, um, superhero or villain, basically Hollywood films. Uh, and I would have a personal trainer. I'd have this. I'd do this, and this would be my day, and this would all look like, and I'd make this much money. But I get very specific, and then I would say, okay, now based on what I say I want, what does that actually look like? That is why I started doing the grouse grind and climbing a mountain every day, because I was like, if you need to be on set for 16 hours a day doing high intensity action films, you have to be
Hmm.
super flexible and strong, and take care of your diet, and I'd be learning lines every day. So my script work, my memory needs to be great. I need to be a representative of the organization that I stand for, because all of these fan things would, I'd have to be
Hmm.
still be a part of a representation enough of this person. So I then need to be able to well verse myself in things like the United Nations if I was then gonna. So you know what I mean about, like, you then start to realize, oh, okay, this is what this actually means. And then
Hmm.
instead of being attached to the outcome, what I said was, now you need to start behaving that way. Because if that's what you say you really want, start behaving that way so that you can go down that trajectory and change your mind as you go. But
Yeah.
otherwise, and I did the same with musical theatre school. I said, I think that that's the Olympics. I got into musical theatre school, and when I got there, I was like, this is how I'm going to become like the best performer I can possibly be. I realized that I'm not a choreography based dancer. I love film.
Hmm.
I got an agent in film. I did
Hmm.
not do well in musical theatre. But
Yeah.
if I didn't take those steps down, I would never have fallen in love with film. I would never have
Yeah.
changed. I would never have done these things. And I would never be actually happier, because I also looked at the musical theatre community and I was like, they're amazing people, but I don't feel like I fit. Whereas with
Right. They're
film,
not my people.
but
Totally.
I wouldn't know that unless I got that far, right?
Absolutely. And you know what I love about what you said, like in the beginning, and even to take it like even less far, Adam Creek, he was another one of our champions at the Men's Health Foundation. He's an Olympic rower, or was an Olympic rower. Um, and now he does talks for corporations all over. But and I think he does like career work as well. But anyways, one post he made recently that totally made me think of what you're talking about is he would do similar things where he would work with his clients and say, okay, what is the blue sky? Where do you want to be? What do you not like about where you are
Mm.
now? All of this stuff. And he got a message, and this was a LinkedIn post he had put on his page that he had shown the message from a client of his who basically was like apologizing because he's like, I know we went down this whole path and I said this is what I wanted and this is why I wanted it and all of these things. But since going down that, I had this opportunity to do X, and it's going to give me more time with my family, which I realized is super important to me. And what
One.
Adam, yeah, had said is he's like, you should not be sorry. That's what this is for. Like,
Yeah.
you just saved yourself a ton of time and
Mm-hmm.
heartache and all of this stuff because you realized by being present and by really thinking through what you care about and what you want in life, you didn't actually have to explore the full path. You
Mm.
found out here that that path actually wasn't for you, and you were able to pivot and go in a direction that means more to you or brings more value at this point in your life. Maybe a younger version of him would have liked that, but now
But
with a family, there's different values.
but even then, yes, I agree. It's just the same analogy of we still think of it as a path. We're not thinking of it as a network of roads. We're like when people do it, they go,
Well,
okay,
see,
Kristina.
I go in forests where a
Yeah.
path is a network of
Right. But so if
so
he
when I think
hadn't,
of it, I do actually.
yeah, fair enough. But if he hadn't
Yes,
gone down
yeah,
that path towards what the reality is, it's just the outcome was not like it's a choose your own adventure. You don't
absolutely.
if you don't but if you don't
You
open
can
the
even
first
make
page.
that in your head. Like that's the crazy thing is like you
Yeah.
can cut the time in half if you start actually thinking about what you want. And I think when you're younger, you don't have the experience to necessarily do as much in your head because you haven't experienced a lot of the career world, like speaking specifically of careers.
But I don't
I
know. I disagree with that because we don't. I think that educators don't give you the tools to be able to think that way. I did a future problem solving course in school when I was 12 years old that
mm,
basically underwent a whole term of us learning how we learn, learning how to think in ways that worked for us, and it was the most incredible. This was in New Zealand, and it was a very it's very interesting. Like you have to apply to get in. It was like not uh
mm,
it was not a course that was available to everybody. And what you would do is if you got through this course the next year, and I left New Zealand, I think shortly, not too long afterwards, but you go into a world forum and start having conversations with other people and start to form these different ways of thinking collectively. And I think that actually that's why I'm pushing back, because the reality is no number of careers, especially in the creative industries, for me as I'm exploring them, not you don't know what is going to exist, so you can't equip yourself in the way that we have traditionally been career
okay. So I
counseled
think you're
or
thinking of it different than I am. Yes, I totally understand that. I'm thinking more about what you're going to enjoy and not enjoy
oh
within your
right,
career. You're thinking
okay,
of a career, and I'm
yeah,
thinking of like, what does your day look like? How much time
mm,
are you spending in the office? How much time do you have with friends? What does your
mm,
life look like? Like, how do you
that
take that
design
pie
element,
chart? Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
How do you take that pie chart? And when you're young, a lot of times, at least I was definitely this way, and a lot of people around me were this way. You think you want this. It's very rare that people actually know what they
Mm,
want. And then, you go down that path and you're like, actually, you know, I don't want this, or I don't want this portion, or I hate working for other companies and I want to work for myself, or
right.
all of these things. But a lot of those don't show up until you experience them. But as you get older, you've experienced more. And so you can say, okay, I know my personality more. I know this is
Mm,
something I like. I know this is something I don't. So I don't necessarily have to try this career out to know if it's a fit for me. I can
mm-hmm,
already look at it and say, okay, maybe do one interview with someone and be like, the breakdown is this. That's not going to work for me because I
mm,
need family time and I'm not going to work 80 hours a week. So maybe this career path is good for me. And
yeah.
I think that's where yeah, when you're older and you have more experience and you've done more, you're just able to kind of suss out those things
Yeah, and
better.
I think that's by virtue of, in an ideal situation, you being able to explore it as you grow
Yeah.
up. Like, does this
Yeah.
matter? What is this?
Jump
Why?
around, right?
Yeah,
I think, I mean,
yeah.
some people just know. And I am so envious of those people who just like grew up and they were like, I'm gonna be this. And they just did it, love it, never questioned it. We're always happy with it. Like that sounds fabulous.
Yeah, I
I'm
always say I'd
not.
love, yeah, I'm the same. I always say I would love to love, I would love to want to be an accountant. I would
Ew.
love to want to. I would love to want to. Or I would love to want to be a lawyer, because that, if I loved to do that, I would affect
Mhm.
change, I would do those things. That's a very, it's not an easy path, but it makes potentially a lot of money. Um and that's, and it's something that everyone needs all the time.
Yeah. You know, it's
I would
funny.
love to
I said
want
that
that.
about singing.
About
I was
singing.
like, yeah, because like I had friends, because like I told you, I grew up singing and I was in amazing programs. Like I just lucked out. I was at these schools that just had incredible teachers, incredible programs, and I just kind of went through them. But
Hmm.
yeah, like I remember friends and we were pretty young and they were like, "Oh yeah, like I want to be a singer." And of course, a lot of like kids want to be singers. And I was just like thinking there and I was sitting there and I was like, I love singing. I would love to want to be a singer, but I have zero desire to be a singer. Like, I don't know what it was. I don't
Mm,
know. Like, even at that young age, I have no clue what it was that
mm,
like was telling me this isn't your path. But there was just something so sure and so steady where I was like, it is not my path.
mm.
I don't wish to be a singer. It was so weird. But yeah,
Well,
I don't
go,
know.
going back to the values thing, I think that, this is such an interesting conversation as you sip your coffee out there and your tea, and actually find ways to do a 10-minute exercise that might help you to understand a little bit more about what you truly value at this point. And
Yeah.
these are not static exercises. These are not things that you just do once and then move on. Like, hopefully these are really alive, um exercises that you do both on your own and with others. um but when you're taking that next week, when you kind of move into this week, I hope that you kind of really identify, like, oh, I'm really liking this. Why am I liking it? Is this
Mhm.
what do I truly value this? And even just that question itself, just a commitment of a week to observation of what you
Yeah.
truly value, will help us all find our values. I truly, and I've, in terms of a concrete example of that for me is, I'm very, like, extroverted in my behavior but introverted in my personality. So I go out a lot, and I have a lot of social engagements and a lot of events and things that I go to, but I recharge by myself. So when I go
We're gonna
out,
discuss this.
that's
We're gonna discuss
separate.
this because
No, we're
I
doing it
have
separately because we are
decided
not.
it doesn't exist. And so we need to no, we're not doing it now. We're gonna have a full-on podcast about
Extroversion,
internal versus
yeah, I know, I feel
external.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. And it again, people like so much science is, and again, Kemi said this so beautifully, it's iterative, it's not
Yeah.
fixed, but our brains like to fix it in stone, and we're like, oh, but we know this now as humanity. Just like when people were like, hey everybody, the world might be round, and people were like, no, that's not how we
You know
live
they
here.
put the guy in jail who said the world was round? He went to jail for
Yes.
many years. I think he even died in
Yes.
jail.
Yeah, he might have. Yeah, this is the thing that terrifies me about affecting extreme change, when
Yeah.
people are not ready. Going back to earlier in our conversation, when there are people that are not ready to hear certain things. So sometimes, when it comes to conflict, negotiations, workplace situations, family, career in general, and relationships in general, sometimes it is a pick your battles kind of moment, right? Like, if I was that guy, I might be like, well, what do I value? Do I value the world knowing that it's round? How much do I value that over
Yeah.
me living my best life? And that's a hard question.
That was like a heavy value system for
Apparently,
him.
so,
He
yeah.
was like, I will die for people to
Do you think
know.
he chose that though, or do you think he was like, I did this, and then
Like he pushed
someone,
and pushed and pushed, and then was
well,
like, whoa, didn't
and
see
then he was
that.
like, oh, everyone hates me. Like this was not like
I
his.
don't know.
Exactly. We don't know that. I shouldn't laugh. I mean, we shouldn't laugh at him. This
Oh,
poor dude that's like, I've changed the world and I'm sitting in a cell and I'll never know how round the world is, like physically, because probably one, we can't get there. But, you know, like how often I don't think people, and I think this is a fun way of ending this, but like, I don't know what was inside like Joan of Arc's mind. She didn't think like, this is what might happen to me. I'm going to weigh those consequences up. She basically was like, I cannot stand for this. I must resist. But, you know, I say certain things and every now and then I'm like, what are the ultimate ramifications? You know, if I lived in a different country, the ultimate ramifications for some of the things we talk about would be extraordinarily severe, you know? And sometimes, you know, coming from, I have not just grown up in Western societies, you know, coming from different places, there's a different culture. You know, you need,
absolutely.
and I don't necessarily, again, I am not going to be the person that goes, well, that's wrong and this is right. I'm going to be the person that says, I should probably know what I'm stepping into as far as I possibly can. But if I turn around and say, hey, the world is now a prism, I might not expect that people are going to want to kill me for it. Like, that's just a theory.
Are you picking?
Yeah. I mean, just, you know, like the person who invented electric cars and people who make these huge discoveries and you know, sometimes, and you find these like weird like conspiracy theories, and there's a part of me that's like, did that happen? Who will know?
Like all the 9/11 ones, those are like
so many. There's so many exist. Anyway, it freaks me out. I always like, when I was growing up, I was like, oh, I think that's a big part of me not being as vocal about a lot of things, because I'm like, you know, it's one thing to be like cancelled, it's another thing to be hunted.
yeah,
like
yeah, no doubt.
And I'm too weak.
And like
I am not a fighter. If someone said that and I was like, well, I'm putting my family and like other people in danger, like, I'm not gonna lie, I don't think I want to do that. Like, if I absolutely had to, I have no idea. I have no idea. I like to think that. I like to think I'm courageous. No, see,
full on, I'm a fighter. I like had situations where someone was getting hurt in front of me, and for me to run in would have like definitely thrown me under the bus, because it was like a group of people beating up this one person. It was back when I was in high school, and I full on like didn't even think about it. No thoughts went through my mind. I was like steaming in to like help this person. I didn't even know the person at all, but I was like, this, I don't know, it wasn't even a thought actually.
Okay, but wait,
I got held back.
But wait, I understand that. That is different to what I said. I didn't say I would worried about putting myself. It was other people. So if my family, if you went to run in and they said, if you do that, we'll kill your sister. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. It's different, extreme. Right? It's so extreme, but that's where my mind goes. I'm like, who am I putting in danger right now? So I would do the same. If it was just me, that's very different. And I don't know how I would.
It really depends on what it is, because my family is also a family of fighters. So
but you don't have that choice. They don't have the freedom of choice then. You're taking away their choice. Yeah. Oh God. Well, next time I speak to Lucy.
No, you know what? It's, for me, it's not about that. Like, it really would come down to like, what is the fight about? Also, they would have their choice in how they wanted to deal with it. And also I would have to suss out how much of a threat I actually think it is. Like, is it just some rando being like, I'm going to kill a family member? That would be very worrisome. But also, what could go, like, what would we need to put in place? Is it government people saying that? Is it legal? Is it not legal? Is it like a troll on social media making a comment on a video? Like, you know, for me personally, you would have to weigh it out, but I know myself and my family enough to know that, like, we are definitely all kind of cut from the cloth of more fights than not. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing. It just
I'm just saying it's not
I have been
easy.
put in situations, and I know this about myself.
Oh, you and me both. I mean, yes, I would not like to get in a fight with you standing in. I mean, I hope you were on my side. That would be nice. Like, that would be nice.
I'm always on your side. What are you talking about?
But it's just a tough choice, right? I think that's the thing. We don't know how we're going to react in various ways. I've had times where I've jumped in, and I have times where I've frozen, and I don't think, you know, and I think that's
totally
part
normal.
We switch into a mode that we are not in control of, and I think that understanding that and normalizing that, just like normalizing failure and normalizing fear, and, you know, being able to operate in that way, I think that's you know, but as long as we know, again, going back to it and wrapping it up, because we have work to do right now. We have lots of work to do. Normalizing our values, being at the forefront of our decision making, I think is something that I felt has really steered me well to either understand what initiatives and things I'm going to engage with and interact with, who I'm going to attract, and how I'm going to decide what I continue with, and how I'm going to, you know, cope, because sometimes you need to cope with what you currently have, but you know what you value, and you know how to exit then, otherwise you sit there feeling helpless in your own life. And that's just a feeling that I would love for us to all graduate from.
Love it. Well said.
Good job, us. Okay. All right, team. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening, bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe, and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.